Hey, this is EmeraldNova. You are listening to We Are One, You Are Two, a PlayStation podcast. Okie dokie, kids, gather around. This is episode 103 of the We Are One, You Are Two PlayStation podcast. I want to do it like a radio announcer or like one of those guys on NPR.
Yeah, you gotta get where you have to get like real close to the mic and talk real low.
Yeah. Yes,
Hi,
real low.
this is Rob.
Like they do in Parks and Rec.
Exactly.
Anyway, I am your host as always, Rob Panzo. Joined once again. My audio is like spiking all over the place. By my co-host, the man with the most, the man with the little, the man in the middle, Matt Rhodes.
Hey-oh, the man with the most, the man with the... Wow, that was a long journey, but we got there.
It was off the cuff too.
Nice.
I didn't even know where it was going to wind up.
Well, you're in the driver's seat, so I'm just along for the ride.
I promise I've been drinking nothing but coffee tonight. All right.
No, that's what's got you extra amped up.
Probably. So, Matt, we've got a great show lined up for this week. For people, we're going to talk a little bit about, of course, what we've been playing. I want to touch on that. We have a special guest, EmeraldNova, who is going to talk to us about the Sega Saturn homebrew community. He's going to introduce himself here in a little bit. And then we're also going to wrap it up with the blog, as we do, just so you can see what's dropping on the PlayStation Store this month, or this week, I'm sorry. And I am keeping a running total. After this week, there will be 109 total games released on the PlayStation Store over 2 months. That is absurd. And we still got the rest of this week in January or February. Goodness.
Killing it.
And not all of them are champions. But anyway, before we get into all of that, I do want to mention that if you do like what you hear today and you're just interested in us doing more things with different guests or just having different opportunities to do crazy stuff, you can certainly join us over on patreon.com/weareoneyouare2, where we are doing something special for our patrons that involves a gift card for the PlayStation Network. But also, if you join us over there, you'll just get early access to the podcast. You'll get opportunities to vote in weekly polls that I'm going to start putting up starting in March. And you're going to have plenty of other opportunities to give us input on what we should be doing and who we should be speaking to as well. I'm going to let patrons dictate our show every month. Anyway, Matt, so you can over to BR1UR2 over on patreon.com. If you don't want to do that, just share us, like us, subscribe to us. We appreciate that as well. Any listenership is good.
For sure.
For sure. Let's go ahead and talk about what we've been playing this week, because for me, I'm switching it up this week.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start as tradition dictates.
Yeah.
It's short and sweet. Rocket League, Fortnite, and a little surprise guest called Tomb Raider Definitive Edition.
I knew it.
Yeah, I was just like, I finally got to the part. I started it again. I was like, I remember this. I finally got to the part where I stopped. I was like, okay, yeah, all right. And then I obviously kept going. I was like, oh, okay, this is starting to get interesting again. So, so I don't know. I played, a few hours, maybe like, I want to say maybe halfway through the game, because I think it's a short campaign. I think it's like only like 8 or 12 hours.
Yeah, I think it is.
I would say I'm probably halfway through the game.
Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty good so far.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
What have you been playing, Robert?
Well, mine's kind of short and sweet this week too. I took a break from Greedfall. I'm 3/4 the way through it. I just needed a break from it this week.
Sure.
I forgot to mention last week that I had tried out Brawlhalla, which is that free-to-play like Smash Brothers knockoff on PlayStation.
Oh, cool.
I forgot to mention that in last week, so I just wanted to give a shout out to that. But what I've really been playing this week is the Bayonetta Vanquish 10th anniversary.
Oh, you bought
up-res.
that, did you?
I did. And let me tell you something. It has one of the sexiest steelbooks I have ever seen. I posted pictures on my Instagram, on my Twitter account. It is gorgeous. Look it up. It is the standard for steelbooks. So I've been playing through Vanquish because I missed it on the PS3. I'm about halfway through because it has 5 acts. I'm somewhere in the middle of Act 3.
I feel like Vanquish was one of the PS Plus games like way back when.
It was. And I said, I'll get to it. Yeah, it's you slide on your knees. It's very bro shooter, like very Gears of War. But it's Platinum Games, which I love. Platinum Games as a developer, and so it's just so over the top, ridiculous. I love it. So I've been playing a lot of that. And then the other thing that I decided to dive into this week, you may have remembered that we read it on the blog last week on the drop, Hunt Showdown.
Okay, yeah.
I had a little time off work one day this week because of some weather here in the NC.
Why did you get like a sprinkling of snow?
Yes. Sprinkling is the operative word. And so enough to cancel the day and shut down half of, Charlotte. But
half of the state.
I decided to jump into the Hunt Showdown on that day. And I spent about 3 to 4 hours in it. And I am unceremoniously addicted to it. I cannot get enough of it. I just think about it all the time. And so it's weird because I'm not usually a multiplayer addict like that, but it's so good. I can't even put into words how much enjoyment I get out of it. And so it's like 1890s Louisiana Bayou, and you are hunting like a supernatural, one of like 3 or 4 supernatural creatures. Sometimes there's 2 in a map, and you're in that either paired up with 2 other people or 1 other person or by yourself, and you're hunting up against at least 12 other people or 12 other groups. And so not only are you competing against the zombies or the different mutated dogs that roam the area, you're looking for this boss that you have to take down. And then once you find him, you have to take him down and banish him back to hell. And that takes some time. And so while you're doing that, you have to defend yourself against any other hunters that may come for your bounty. Because once it's banished, you collect the bounty and then you have to leave the map. There's certain areas that you go to and they're randomized every time. You have to get to the edges of the map and you have to extract yourself. And so it's like PvE and PvP all in one.
Nice.
But it's awesome because you're very much, it's 1890. So you've got you don't have machine guns. You don't have AK-47s. You've got like hunting rifles and pistols and like axes to deal damage with.
Cool.
And so I'm just really, really enjoying it. It's the atmospheres, the soundtrack's incredible. And I've never played a game where sound matters so much. If you're talking on the mic with other people, you can hear other people somebody can hear you in the distance if you're talking too much. You can scare crows, you can scare horses and they'll make noises, and that'll alert people. You can hear the gunshots everywhere of other people fighting. And I know that's typical for a multiplayer game, but for whatever reason, the sound in this game is just amplifies that feeling of, is someone near me? Oh, there's another group. Maybe they're hunting the creature we're supposed to be hunting. Let's go over there and take care of them and then get the prize for ourselves, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah, if you're interested, if you bought that and you listen to this podcast and you're interested, hit me up. We are 1, you are 2. Hit me up on Twitter. I'll give you my PSN and I'll hunt with you. It's good stuff. Definitely worth the money.
Cool.
And Bayonetta I had purchased a month and a half ago, so I knew I'm gonna finish up Vanquish this week and dive right into Bayonetta, and then I'll get back to Greedfall. But that's what I've been playing. It's a pretty short week.
Cool.
Good stuff. All right. That being said, I guess we're going to go ahead and let's move into our interview here. Let's talk a little bit with EmeraldNova about what's going on in the Sega Saturn homebrew community, and we'll go from there. All right, Matt. So this time we're doing something a little bit different, and we are joined here by our guest, EmeraldNova. Emerald, I want to thank you for joining us here today. We appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Behind enemy lines, I guess would be the term if we're back in '95.
It's true.
Yeah, that is true, I guess. So if you want to talk to us a little bit about who you are, just to kind of introduce yourself to our community. I know you probably have your own community that'll be listening that'll be much more familiar with who you are, but kind of introduce yourself a little bit so we can kind of get a sense of who we brought on today.
Okay, I'm sure I'll be bringing dozens of people with me.
I'll take it.
That means that there will be dozens listening.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. I'm EmeraldNova. I am a Twitch streamer that does live homebrew coding, generally on the weekends. And that coding is based entirely right now on the Sega Saturn.
Cool.
So that means essentially in real time, I program games for the Sega Saturn, essentially in my free time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, for the uninitiated, and I know Matt might fall into this category.
That's me.
why don't you tell us a little bit about what home brewing is? If you're someone who's not familiar to listen to this podcast, you're like, what are they talking about? Can you give us like a brief explanation of what you see is, or what home brewing is?
Essentially, it's like I said, it's you program a game, you create a game for an older piece of hardware, something you might not necessarily be licensed to use. So generally speaking, if the hardware is still alive, like if you wanted to program a game for the PS5 or something, well, the PS5 is not out yet, but I'm sure people are working on it. You would contact Sony. They would give you some sort of development kit for a price, and then you'd have to work out licensing fees, and then they get a cut of what you make. A home brewer, however, is generally going to be working off of older hardware that is no longer supported, and there will be ways to compile software for whatever console you're on, and ways to run it. So this is a lot easier for older, the exception to the Saturn. This is a lot easier for the older consoles because generally you can put in an EverDrive or an SD2 SNES or something like that. Some of those aftermarket additions that can load up games onto your device, or like the PSIO, which you guys might be more interested in.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm a little more familiar with that one as well, too.
Yeah.
How did you get into it? Because it's interesting that you have, I know this community, there's a community that exists for this, but how did you get into homebrewing? What kind of gave you that desire, or wanted you to kind of drove you in that direction to want to dive into that? Because it is time consuming, and it is something that requires a little bit of knowledge and skill too. But what got you into that?
It is exceptionally time consuming. I can attest to that. I wanted to make games, and I've got ideas for games that I wanted to make. And my initial thought was, okay, Unity is a thing, but I've got experience working in Unity, and it's very easy to make something that plays terribly, and it's very difficult to make something that plays well. So Unity is more of a prototyping machine from my perspective than a real thing. And I've always been a Sega boy, essentially. I grew up with the Sega Genesis. Eventually, I saved up enough to get a Dreamcast, and I figured, people can still make games. There's games like Pure Solar on the Genesis, and I know there's like a dozen or so homebrew games you can get on the Dreamcast that are still coming out. Maybe I should pick something, one of those consoles where, at the very least, my artistic abilities will translate well to something that's older. Because, I'm not making anything that looks good enough to go on the Steam store. Yeah, so it was kind of a decision-making process between what was in my ability to program and what was in my ability to make look decent. So the Sega Genesis was largely out because I couldn't find good tools to make things easy to make, from what I could tell at the time that I started, which was a couple Decembers ago, I guess, the end of 2018, when I said, okay, I want to start making something. You basically, from what I understood, you had to start an assembly. I know now that's not the case. That might not have been the case at the time, but I didn't know where the information was. I then looked at the Dreamcast, and there were proof of concept stuff going on. And then I saw the other home brewers doing stuff that looked like Half-Life. I'm like, let's step back. What's within my artistic budget? Mm-hmm. And the Sega Saturn is within my artistic budget. I can do 32 by 32 textures. I can do 64 by 64 textures, and I can make something with a low polygon count. If I try to make something look like Shenmue, I'm going to fail. I know that already. So at that point, I looked for, okay, how does anyone make a game for the Sega Saturn? Thank God for Johannes Fetz, who made the Joe engine. Joe engine is like the entry level how to get something working on the Saturn. And most homebrewers on the Saturn, well, almost all of them have started out on it, unless they're really old, unless they're from way back in like the early 2000s. They're on Joe engine. And then they eventually grow out of it when it starts to become too limiting. So it's, basic C programming language, and it gives you all the tools you need to get started.
Okay.
Cool.
Oh, that's awesome. So you talked a little bit about the process of getting there, and that you currently do that. Talk to us a little bit about your decision to work with the Saturn a little bit more in terms of you're streaming it, you're making it, and you also said that there's a bit of a community to it. So I guess talk to us a little bit about the community aspect, from the streaming to other people that you have met or interacted with. I've watched some of your streams. I went back and watched some of them, and you certainly seem to have a following of loyal people who tune in and regularly check out what you're doing. And so could you just talk to us a little bit about that?
I mean, following is probably overselling it. Most of those people are there babysitting me. I'm not even kidding. If you see Ponut64, he's responsible for me being able to do almost anything at all. when I got started, I jumped on the Joe Engine forums and I said, hey, what are some good resources? There were already some samples built in. So you can compile stuff and get running and just kind of figure out what you want to do. And like an idiot, I started doing some 3D stuff as my first ever project outside of Unity and stuff. Always a bad decision. I was essentially trying to make a soft port of a Daggerfall, like a really light version of Daggerfall. I was calling it Scenario. That project is currently on the back burner because I just do not have the bandwidth right now to handle it. Bandwidth as in personal resources of time and being able to work on it.
Right.
So, but at the time, for most of last year, that's what I was working on, is a 3D game. I jumped on the forums. Ponut's there to help. XL2 is there to help. XL2 is the guy behind Sonic Z-Dream and Project Z-Dream. Essentially, the Sega Saturn had a failed prototype called Sonic X-Treme that Sega canned for reasons that boggle the mind. And he essentially just remade a version of the game that would actually plays on real hardware. It's fantastically fun. Pretty much anyone that plays any sort of Sonic fan games already knows about this project. XL2 is probably right now the most famous person in the Saturn homebrew scene. But essentially those guys were on the Joe Engine forums, and that's where I got started, is requesting help from them. And the decision to go into streaming was me saying, okay, there's samples here. There's some good examples. But I need a little bit more help. I need a lot more hand-holding of what's going on. And there looks to be a lot of reinventing the wheel whenever I see anyone else getting started. What I wanted to do is I wanted to exhaustively document the process of making a game from beginning to end. So I made the commitment for Scenario specifically that whenever I'm working on that game, I am live on stream and I'm recording it and I'm pushing it to YouTube. So at the very least, if you were ever interested in homebrew and I managed to complete that game, you could say it takes this many hours from beginning to end to figure out how to make that. Or it takes this many hours to learn this. And in the meantime, you can look at each individual stream and each topic and say, okay, how do I want to copy what his code is doing over here. Let me steal this. Let me steal that. And all my code gets pushed to GitHub and people can just take the code and download it and run it and alter it if they want, as long as I'm still somewhere in the comments being credited.
So in a lot of ways, it sounds like it's certainly, I mean, it's you documenting the process, but it also sounds like from what you've talked about so far, it's very much a community thing. And so it's a nice way for you to be able to develop this and work through it on a live stream, but you also have a couple of community members there that are guiding you or helping you through every step of the way and kind of helping, as a collaborative effort, I guess is the best way to look at that.
Yeah. Collaborative is definitely the word of the day in terms of Saturn homebrew. We're all over. Most of our activity is now on the Sega Extreme Discord. Once I popped into there, I kind of disappeared from the Joe Engine forums. People will go to the Sega Extreme forums, and that's where I'll talk about the competition in a little bit, but that's where everyone posts their projects when they're ready to be downloaded and played. But overall, the Sega Extreme Discord has probably a few hundred people at this point. Most of them are not active, but several dozens are. And we constantly are in the Saturn dev channel asking each other for advice, asking some basic stupid C questions because we forget, and just seeing what everyone else is up to, seeing what technique, how do you want to talk to this device, how do you want to talk to this chip, stuff like that. Just everyone helping each other out. And some help more than they receive help. XL2 is certainly an impressive force. He is probably the closest person in the history of the Sega Saturn, official or unofficial, to reach the full capacity, or the closest to the full capacity of the console, from my understanding.
Okay. You mentioned that forum. Have you seen any growth or change since you've started this? 2 years ago, have you seen any growth or change or decline in the amount of people working with or on that forum to help each other through development? I
will facetiously claim a lot of credit for the massive explosion we've had in interest over the last year. I know it's primarily due to other people. Definitely the updates to Sonic Z-Dream happening. But I do know that a not insignificant number of people got introduced to Saturn Homebrew because they accidentally bumped into me on Twitch for 2 seconds before leaving.
Oh, okay.
But no, there's definitely a lot more interest now. 2019 was a big blow up year for the Saturn. We got a lot of new members, and the thing that I'm actually proud of that it kind of ended disastrously, but while it was running, it was great, was the 25th anniversary competition.
Yeah, so you want to talk to us a little bit about that? Because you mentioned that a couple of times.
Yeah, so the 25th anniversary competition, which is originally supposed to be a themed competition, a game jam, it started as an idea. It's like, hey guys, what can we actually do in 3 days? And everyone said nothing. You're an idiot. Stretch it out to 3 months. So it's like, okay, yeah, traditional game jam format maybe is a little bit shaky on this kind of hardware. This is probably the hardest thing you could program for. I don't know if the PS3 is a close second, but I'll get into this ridiculous architecture later. But the competition is eventually turned into, well, the Sega Saturn's birthday was what, like September? Was it September or November? No, it was
November.
August,
I think it's November, right?
Here's the thing. Let me just look it up real quick. It's got 3 different release dates. That's the thing. I know the American release date, but the Saturn release date was November 22. Okay, you're right. I'm thinking of the other one. I'm thinking the American one. November 22, 94. So November 22, 2019 would have been the 25th anniversary. So we decided, okay, sometime back in August, let's vote on a theme. And then everyone, 3 months, let's get something done. 3 months pass. And then I asked guys, I've personally been very busy. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not done. Are you guys done? And everyone's like, hey, if you want to add a few days to the deadline, go ahead, because I could use a few more days. So then we extended down to January. Then it became essentially a New Year's competition. And I feel like that time of year is probably a little bit easier for everyone to get a little bit more free time to finish up anyway. So when I do it again this year, it's going to be around that time. But we eventually submitted about 7 unique, new games that were not based off of patching or altering previous games. And then there was 4 patch games, or basically they're all translations or emulations of something else in a separate competition. Unfortunately, what appeared to be some overnight, ghost votes kind of flooding our open voting setup kind of made us rethink of how we're going to determine winners. And also at the same time, the Australian bushfire was in full swing. So we decided, okay, let's just take the prize money, give it to Australia, call it a day, and just celebrate that everyone managed to create something. Because everyone was already happy with the fact that something happened. Mm-hmm. And the top 3 leaders on the board said, hey, I don't like the way the votes are going because it looks weird that all these votes came in overnight and there's no downloads. So let's just call it off. Let's call off the ranking. But while we were, in the competitive spirit, there was some fun posts. There is people posting stuff we didn't even know we were working on anything. And there's just people coming out of the woodwork compared to what we thought was happening, submitting new games that no one's had the chance to play before.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, to think that, 25 years later that a console has life in that way still, that people are holding competitions or that people are continuing to develop and build stuff for it.
Yeah, it can be weird sometimes because it almost feels like the way I look at some of these communities, the less popular the console was in its day, the more people are interested in doing stuff for it.
Yes.
And that might have something to do with hardware limitations. Because I know the 3DO, which absolutely nobody purchased, has a really interesting homebrew scene. Like they've got people doing tech demos and stuff. I don't know if they have any real games happening. I don't pay attention to anything outside the Saturn too much, but there's people working on stuff. And, I'm pretty sure at the moment the Sega Saturn has a much bigger homebrew community active right now than the PS1. I don't know if that held before, or if it's going to hold after, but at the moment it looks like the Saturn is one of the bigger homebrew communities from my perspective.
What do you think has sparked the uptick in this interest in homebrewing, particularly with those older? Because I would agree with you. I've noticed, I catch winds of things here and there about older consoles. Once they're out of, once they're out of that window where the companies no longer care about them, don't worry about updating them, especially now, anything like that. What do you think has drawn people to want to do this kind of stuff with these older consoles? What do you think has caused this interest, I'd say, over the last couple of years, really, for it to continue to grow as a community?
Well, there's the new stuff that's coming out. I know Ponent64 has his Untitled Pony game, and XL2 has his Project Z Dream, and he just kind of finished up the latest demo for Sage, which is like some sort of Sega fan game competition that I've never participated in. Around the end of 2018, those projects kind of gained a lot of popularity, and they were adding kind of like the finishing touches for the versions that were going to be popular when all these new people came in.
Mm-hmm.
So there was already some impressive work getting done on the Saturn, and then that's around when I joined up. And I think near the tail end of 2019, the competition kind of boosted a little bit of interest. And in the meantime, you have people like SED coming out with the Fenrir, which is an optical drive emulator, a way to replace the CD drive in order to load up games. Professor Abrasive, who I'm a backer for on Patreon, for the record, is working on the Sadiator. We're currently beta testing the Sadiator, which is another device that plugs into the Saturn that allows you to load up games to circumvent the copy protection. And that's a relatively new thing. Before SED and Abrasive, we had the GDMU. I keep forgetting the name that he goes by, but on his forums, he goes by GDMU. But essentially, the guy that makes the GDMU also had something called the Phoebe and the Rhea, which were for different compatibility versions of the same thing, which is just an optical drive emulator to replace the CD on the Saturn. The Saturn CD protection has been unbroken for the majority of its lifetime, and it's just magnificently complicated. I don't understand it. Professor Abrasive does. I know there's a video out there with Retro RGB and Professor Abrasive that goes over the details of it. I never remember it. But the fact that people are now getting more access, or at least they know that more access is coming down the line, mm-hmm. where they can load up games on the Saturn, means if you can load up an arbitrary image on the Saturn, you could probably also play your own game on the Saturn. And also, I think right now, I'm probably one of the only homebrewers that's actually live streaming on Twitch. I know that occasionally when I do go on Twitch, I'm high ranking in the science and technology category. So the idea that someone looking at programming something, if you're looking at programming game development, you go on Twitch, you will probably see me if you're just browsing. Mm-hmm. And that will introduce you to the concept of homebrewing if you weren't thinking of it before. And I'm just biasing it in the direction of the Saturn if I'm contributing in that way. But otherwise, it's just a massive coincidence. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah, and I think something about homebrewing kind of plays a little bit on nostalgia, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Most homebrew projects are going to be banking on some previous IP or some previous flavor, or at least, maybe you don't want to make Earthbound. Maybe you want to make a different flavor of Earthbound, which is kind of like how Undertale became a thing. And if Undertale was programmed on, a Super Nintendo or a Sega Genesis, maybe it would have been part of this space as opposed to a commercial success, because no one can make money on homebrew.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's that nostalgia, and I think that too. The other thing that I always preach to people, and I know that I think this is true for most console enthusiasts, is never sell your hardware. And so if you've got this hardware lying around, there's a temptation there, right, to maybe go back and either play old games, and then that leads you down that road of, well, are people still doing stuff for this kind of thing? And certainly, like you mentioned, Professor Abrasive certainly seems like he's got quite a following on Patreon. I was just checking that out, over 1,200 patrons. And so there is this community that's very interested in seeing what can be done with these older systems and how it functions too.
On that note, the Saturn is kind of a unique beast in that the hardware for its time was so massively complicated. It was mind-boggling how they came to this design. Mm-hmm. We actually, when we program for the Saturn, we have to keep all these different chips in mind if we're going to use them.
No, absolutely. Because I know one thing that always fascinated me was how complicated PS3's architecture was.
Yeah, the cell processor, that was supposed to be a beast on its own to try and figure out. So for just for reference, the PlayStation, from what I understand, is kind of like a single core architecture. You got a main CPU, you got a video processor, you got your sound chip, but otherwise pretty straightforward. You program one thing, it's running in serial, and it just works. So if you want to make something in the PS1, it's pretty easy to get into the hardware. Relatively speaking, I don't want to downplay the PS1 homebrew community, but relative to the Saturn, it's pretty easy to extract more power from the system if you need it, because the programming is more straightforward. The Sega Saturn is controlled by, I want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 sounds about right. 8 different independent chips that you would have to address individually if you want to use. So there's a master and slave CPU. There's VDP1, VDP2, the video display processors. There is a system control unit where we also have an additional DSP that can't be programmed in C attached to. We have multiple banks of memory. We have video memory, high work RAM, low work RAM, various caches that we can access. The video memory also contains a frame buffer that we can occasionally write to if we need to. And then we have 2 different sound chips. So the thing that I always say to kind of introduce the concept of the Sega Saturn is as if you told Harvey Dent to try and create a computer system, because there's 2 of every chip. And it doesn't feel like there needs to be, but there is. It's I still don't understand how any of it works, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think developers back then exactly enjoyed it either, if I remember correctly.
That was a huge problem. That's why a lot of the Saturn games did not look as impressive as they could. Because honestly speaking, the Saturn is so much more powerful than the PlayStation. It's scary if you can get it to work well. Like if you've seen the Shenmue demo that they built for Saturn before they moved to the Dreamcast, it looks ridiculous, and it makes Final Fantasy look like crap.
Do you think that kind of complicated architecture is what helped maybe contribute to the downfall of the system itself?
Undoubtedly. There's no way a programmer, when Sega was doing stuff back in 94, 95, 94 is when all these documents started coming out. And then you still have things coming out based on those documents that is just dead wrong. If you look up documentation of the Saturn, it's not entirely complete. Some of it is wrong. And everything's too complicated for you to figure out on your own unless you have someone else trying and failing to help you out to figure it out with you, which is the whole point of the Sega Extreme community. That's why we're doing so well with the homebrew stuff, because we can help each other out. Imagine you're a third-party developer, or even worse, you're the guy working on Sega Sonic Extreme, and Yuji Naka doesn't even want to share his engine with you, and you're in the same freaking company. So basically, those guys were starting from scratch. They're Sega's official programmers, the guys that were doing all the cool arcade stuff, they're used to coding in assembly. All of a sudden, they have this massive C library, 8 different chips that they can send stuff to that they have no idea how they work. And they got to start getting everything to talk to each other. And if you're using the DSP, which is usually used for lighting stuff, you can't even use C. You have to write a separate program in assembly and have it timed to communicate with the C program at the right number of cycles. It's a disgusting mess. I mostly stick to the main CPU and VDP1 because right now I'm doing a 2D game. Mm-hmm. That's my main focus right now, and that's all the power I need. Saturn, it's super easy to get 2D stuff to do whatever you want, and you don't need to use all the power in order to get it to look nice.
Now, yeah, I think that's funny you mentioned that, Matt, because that was exactly what I was going to ask him or talk about too. Is that I feel like that ultimately helped PlayStation in the end I think that's the same thing we saw with a little bit with the PlayStation 3 era and that's why we haven't had people look back on it so poorly, because it used that proprietary, bizarre, cell processing, and it just really made things complicated in a way it didn't need to. And certainly Saturn has that history of being complicated, and it seems like you guys are just now really starting to not fully understand it, but getting into a way that it is doable, much more doable than it was, say, 15 years ago.
So it's rather unfortunate that XL2, his personal life is going to essentially cause him to retire, because he's accomplished so much already. And I don't want to go into details about what's going on in his personal life. Nothing bad. Just, some people, they eventually you just have to move on. His stuff, I don't know that you would say it's strictly speaking better than some of the top tier stuff that you see out of the Saturn. I know the most visually impressive games are generally cited as Burning Rangers and the like, or Knights, but I would rate his stuff at the same level as that. Right now, Ponent 64 and mostly Ponent 64, I'm just helping with documentation right now, are trying to streamline the 3D process for newcomers. Mm-hmm. So he's working on something called a Great Value Engine. I'm trying to document it and create a Blender plugin that will allow you to take a 3D model and shove it on the Saturn and just have it pop up for you. Okay. Because otherwise you're doing hours and hours of work to try and figure out how to get a quad on screen. Right. And a quad is the base polygonal unit that the Saturn uses, as opposed to a triangle, which everyone else uses, except I guess the 3DO.
My last question, I guess, would be for you, and Matt, certainly you can feel free to jump in. But EmeraldNova, once you feel like you've really gotten what you can out of the Saturn, is there any plans to move on to any other hardware systems to continue homebrewing on those, or is Saturn kind of where you feel like you're home and where you plan on staying for the foreseeable future?
In my own private time, is when I get to code the Saturn. Right now, I'm in the middle of a PhD. Well, not the middle, the end of a PhD program. So my time is very limited.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently focused on helping with Ponut 64's Great Value Engine. After that, I'm going to go back to Forsaken Plain, which is my contest entry for last year, and try to get it online. The Saturn has a plugin called a Netlink that has a 28K modem in it for the North American systems, and it can dial up. So I'm going to try and dial up to a server of my creation to get that online, create some content for the game, let it stand on its own. I want to go back and finish up Scenario, which is the game I started with, which is like that 3D Daggerfall type game that I wanted to create. I have ideas for a handful of more games after that.
Okay.
And I want to map the games to the capabilities of the hardware. Right now, I'm very comfortable on the Saturn. Saturn is well within the boundaries of the amount of power I need to do what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I've been looking at the Saturn for a year. So I feel like I know it better, and starting from scratch on a new piece of hardware would be more difficult. If I were to move on to the Dreamcast for a sequel to one of the games that I'm working on right now, that seems likely many years from now. Or if I wanted to do a PC release or a PC port of what I'm doing on the Saturn, I'd probably do that. But I think the Saturn is a comfortable home for I'm at for the foreseeable future. I don't ever plan on leaving the Sega Extreme community. Even if I stop working, I'm just going to hang out. Eventually, hopefully, I'll be as knowledgeable as some of my older brothers or whatever you would call them in the Saturn community, like Ponut or XL2, where I can answer questions and be helpful. My primary goal whenever I'm working on something on the Saturn is to help other people make games before I help myself make a game, which is why I keep jumping off to these different projects, because it's easier to make a 2D game than a 3D game. And the great value stuff, I want to help other people make 3D before I finish with my 2D thing.
Okay. Makes perfect sense to me. Stick with what you know and kind of spend that time there, particularly since it does take, like you just mentioned, it takes quite a bit of time to move through a system like that and really get to know it too, especially since you've chosen one of the more difficult systems too, right, to work with. So
it's probably going to take me at least 3 or 4 more years before I get really comfortable with the Saturn to start doing everything I want to do with it. Because like I said, there's 8 different chips you can play with. Some of them are not documented to the point where we can even use them at all. That problem is being solved by other people in the community. But eventually I will get to the point where I want to try and max out the hardware. But that's going to be way down the road. Okay.
Makes sense. Awesome.
Just real quick, though.
Sure.
I do want to just encourage if you want to get into Saturn homebrewing. I know everyone has their own homebrew community for whatever console you're on. I encourage everyone to pick the console that they love the most to try and get into it. Some of them are harder than others. Certainly the Saturn is not easy, but the starting point has never been simpler than it is now. You can jump on to the Sega Extreme Discord and ask questions. Everyone's always friendly and ready to ask questions. If you go into any of my videos, if you go into my Twitch stream, there's links to all the resources you need. Start off in Joe Engine, go onto this Sega Extreme Discord, ask for me, ask for someone who's helpful, ask general questions out into the void or the ether. Someone will help you. You will get your game up and running soon.
Absolutely. And if you want to, EmeraldNova, if you want to go ahead and tell us one more time about your Twitch channel as well, in case people want to start there, looking for you and being able to interact with you as well.
So I'm on Twitch right now as EmeraldNova. I think maybe I'm EmeraldNova Game, depending on how you type the username. But essentially, if you look under the science and technology and you look for a green 7-pointed star on a blue background as my logo, and you look for EmeraldNova or you look for Saturn or Homebrew, I'll show up. Right now, I'm on a reduced schedule because of real life work getting in the way. But generally, right now, I'm going to be doing one hardware test stream for the Sadiator and one programming stream. Eventually, I will get back to doing a weekly stream like I originally planned.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming by and chatting with us today about this, educating us a little bit on Homebrew. I know I speak for Matt, I think, in saying that he's probably less familiar with it than I am.
100%.
Yeah,
I would just like to say I don't want to be responsible for anything I said, because anytime anyone describes the Saturn hardware, they inevitably say something that's incorrect. Look it up, ask questions, and don't blame me if I'm wrong, because 1 year of experience is not enough to know what this thing is.
Well, certainly. And when you think about, I'll throw this in there, when you think about the fact that devs had their hands on this and had Sega's help, and there were still people who fully couldn't they found it difficult to develop for. And so to come back, 20 some years later and attempt to do this, it certainly is a different beast.
Sega, they just shot themselves in the foot, because you see PS1 games we get imported to the Saturn, they run like crap because they just didn't know how to make things work. And it's hard to convince, the general audience, hey, the Saturn actually has a lot more power. You just need to know how to use it. And like the only examples we can run on is just, hey, remember when Grandia got ported and it got worse? That's an example. And that's like the only one you can point to.
Well, again, we appreciate you stopping by, EmeraldNova. Thanks for hanging out with us today. And, hopefully we'll be able to see you in the future, or talk to you a little bit more in the future with this kind of stuff. We'll kind of keep an eye on it and see how the community continues to go, since retro gaming and retro consoles are certainly, I think, not that they're hype, but they're certainly having a newfound appreciation over the last...
A resurgence.
A resurgence, yes, is a good word, over the last couple of years. And so I'm sure that Saturn homebrew community will continue to grow as that interest in retro gaming does too. So thanks again for stopping by, though. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I love the chance to, proselytize for the Saturn homebrew community.
That was a pretty good interview, I think.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. That was very informative, because, when, you did speak for me when when you were like, tell us what home brewing is, because I had no clue. It was very informative for me to kind of understand like the cool things that people are doing in their free time to create, new games for old systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there's a lot of emulation and home brewing on the Vita and the PSP, and that's how those systems kind of have extended their life cycles. But it's kind of neat to see something that's 26 years old this year, right? It's in its 26th year.
Absolutely.
Continue to have a life. And certainly he plugged a lot of the different forums you can go to check that out. And I imagine that if you wanted to do that with our PlayStation or PlayStation 2 or even PlayStation 3 at this point, you could probably go check that stuff out too. There's probably communities for that too.
For sure.
So as a PlayStation podcast. All right, Matt, it's time for the drop.
Ooh, see you soon.
See you soon. So I'm excited about this week because the top game, I'd like to go first if you don't mind.
Oh, all right, I guess.
Because I've been waiting for this game for about 3 to 4 weeks now. I had my eyes on it after I saw some trailer footage for it, and I'm super pumped to check it out. It'll have to wait, but I'll have to look and see how much it is because it looks really, really good. All right, so I'm going to start us off here with Bloodroots. PS4 digital out February 28th. In Bloodroots, the world is your weapon. Improvise and adapt to an ever-changing ballet of ultra-violence in a bloody revenge quest across the weird West. Betrayed and left for dead, Mr. Wolf is hell-bent on finding his killer and enacting revenge, alone and vastly outnumbered. And this game looks like so much fun. Check out a trailer for that. If you don't know what I'm talking about with Bloodroots, check it out. It looks incredible.
I will. I'll have to do that. All right, up next, we got Bucket Knight. PS4 digital out February 28th.
Not to be confused with Shovel Knight.
That's correct. Bucket Knight is a classic run-and-gun platformer game. Even knights still have to pay taxes, loans, and alimony. Help unnamed but brave knight in his sacred mission to find the Holy Grail and make some money. Explore dungeons, slay enemies, avoid traps, stay alive, and get rich.
I don't know. If I was paying enough alimony, I think I'd probably let the enemies slay me or
right.
Not avoid those traps.
Right, yeah. Oh, hey, look at this next game. Right up your alley there, bud.
All right. It's working out this week. Coffee Crisis, PS4 out digital February 28th. Coffee Crisis is a Neo rogue brawler. What is that? That puts you in the shoes of the only baristas on Earth with enough heavy metal in their veins to fend off an alien assault. Play solo or join a friend to fight across 8 unique locations ranging from your coffee house headquarters to the far reaches of outer space. I can't even.
Is awesome. Oh,
these are 3 ridiculous games so far.
Yeah, right? All right. Well, now to be outdone, Deirdre Empty. PS4 digital out February 27th. The epic of a girl and a small dragon spun into a fantasy sky. Into the fantasy sky. Ooh. A new look of 2D shooting, high field shooting is here. Run around the sky and confront powerful enemies with a variety of weapons and a high degree of freedom. flowing clouds, sparkling lights, shining wings illuminating the sky, and translucent graphics that color the story. Small wings and a girl's wish run through the sky. Yeah. Okay.
I want everybody who's listening to this podcast to rewind it about 15 seconds, and I want you to take a shot every time Matt says the word sky. See if you're still sober enough to listen to me read about Ganbear Super Strikers.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's a lot.
PS4. Yeah. PS4, PS Vita, digital cross buy. This looks interesting. Strategize. I think this is on Steam. Strategize and kick your way to the goal to become the best soccer player. Ganbear Super Strikers is an innovative mix between tactical RPG and soccer. Win matches to level up and earn new equipment that will allow you to learn special abilities, boost your player's stats, or protect yourself against altered status effects.
All right. Up next, we got Grizzland. PS4 digital. Oh my gosh. Okay. Welcome to the Grizzled Planet. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Grizzland. Okay. Sorry. I was confused. I'm an idiot. All right. Welcome to the Grizzled Planet, a seamless open world platformer presented in retro style and filled with old school challenges. Explore without pointers to uncover secret areas. Equip yourself with unique items and skills. Even the ability to shrink and enlarge or explode and recombine. Only through self-discovery will you overcome enemy dinos in epic combat and find the truth of Grizzland. Okay, now that you've had numerous shots, I want you to go back 15 seconds and re-listen to that because the cover art looks like sperm. So I was thinking that whole time, Jizzland. And yeah, just reread that or re-listen to that, thinking that in your head. Why do their heads look like sperm, Robert?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I was thrown by the enemy dinos in that last sentence.
Yeah, what? Dinos? Okay.
I did not see that coming at all. All right.
Up next.
Hay Fever, PS4 digital. Help Thomas the allergic mailman. Help Thomas the allergic.
What is with this week? Oh my God. Oh, all right. We got like 20 more to get through. Let's go. We got this.
Help Thomas the allergic mailman gather all his lost letters in this challenging and unique 2D platformer. Okay. All right.
I promise we weren't taking shots along with you.
All right. So we got that he's gathering all his lost letters in this challenging and unique 2D platformer. In Hay Fever, the player takes control of Thomas, a young postman with a strong work ethic. Okay. There's just one little tiny issue. Thomas suffers from terrible, and we mean terrible, allergies.
I love how they emphasize that he has terrible allergies. I wonder how that's portrayed. Okay. I'm excited. All right. Up next. Hero Must Die Again. PS4 digital out February 26th. You are the hero. Your last memory is felling the demon Gil, thus saving the world. However, you died in the process. Guile. I was saying, sure. Guile. Fine. Thus saving the world. However, you died in the process, and now you cannot remember her, the one for which you fought the demon. The gods have given you 5 more days to put your affairs in order, but time will quickly take its toll on you and you will grow weaker as the days pass.
All right.
Okay. So it's like you're like in purgatory, or? Right.
I guess. I mean, all right. Anyway, House Flipper.
Moving on.
House Flipper is a unique chance to become a one-man renovation crew. Buy, repair, and remodel devastated houses. Give them a second life and sell them at a profit. Experiment with interior designs and decorating styles you like. Express yourself. You can buy an empty apartment and furnish it, or focus on repair and installations. All right. Anybody who's done real housework does not want to play that game.
Or maybe it's someone who's trying to get into house flipping. They want to know how to do it.
Maybe.
All right. Up next, we got Infliction Extended Cut. PS4 digital. Wander through an interactive nightmare set within a once happy home. Uncover the heartbreaking mystery hidden within messages, artwork, and other vestiges of domestic life, all while struggling to survive encounters with a relentless entity that stands in the way of finding absolution. Creepy.
Yeah.
I wonder if the entity that stands in the way is yourself. Ooh, twist.
Ooh. Mega Man Zero ZX Legacy Collection. Cool. This is finally coming out. Mega Man Zero / ZX Legacy Collection brings together 6 classic titles in one game. Mega Man 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as Mega Man ZX and ZX Advent. The collection also features a Z Chaser, an exclusive new mode created just for this set of games. Awesome. I've never played any of the Mega Man Zero games.
Yeah. All right. Up next, MX Nitro Ultimate Edition. PS Digital out out February 27th. Good Lord, I can't read. MX Nitro Unleashed invites you to blaze into motocross racing nirvana. The game expands upon the original MX Nitro with new tracks, new bosses, and new outfits. The game also includes several improvements from the original, including improved visuals. How is there bosses in like a motocross kind of game? Are you just racing against them?
I don't know. I caught that and I was like, I thought you misread it at first, but
No,
it says
I did not. It says new bosses, Robert.
I don't know. I'm still recovering from the allergic mailman. I'm still choking over here. All right. I can't even handle bosses. One Punch Man, a hero nobody knows. This might be interesting. The first One Punch Man game finally makes its debut. Dive into a dynamic fighting game experience with beloved characters from the first season of One Punch Man. Play as your favorite hero or become one. Create your own hero avatar and choose your own set of powers and abilities. From my understanding, One Punch Man can beat anybody with one punch. And so I'm kind of curious how they do that in a game. That's like Superman. So
interesting. Yeah. Okay. Up next, we have Ritual Crown of Horns. PS4 digital out February 28th. Ritual Crown of Horns is a slaughterhouse, a fast-paced action game set in an alternate Wild West, a demonic version of a hellish frontier. This arcade-inspired title unravels a tale about an unlikely duo, a bounty hunter who comes back from beyond the grave, yearning to exact revenge on his killers, and a witch who aids him with a series of powerful rituals to further her own agenda. So another kind of Wild Westy kind of game this week.
I feel like Sony contacts Sony and they're like, hey, listen, we have a Wild West game coming out. Is there anything else we need to worry about coming out that week? And Sony's like, no, it's fine. No. And then they tell...
No. There's a Weird West game, but that's not the same.
Yeah, I feel like this is not the only week where this has happened. I feel like they purposely go, you know what? Actually, I believe the week of February 28th might be better for you because there's nothing coming out.
Yeah,
then.
like Sony delays them by a couple days just so they can have like themed weeks.
Yeah, like wink, wink. Watch this. All right. So this is actually kind of fitting because we were just talking about Sega today. Space Channel 5 VR kind of funky news flash. PSVR digital. Dance is your power to protect the Earth against invading aliens. Sega's legendary Dreamcast rhythm game, Space Channel 5, is coming to virtual reality as Space Channel 5 VR kind of funky news flash. Your task is to master a series of life-saving dancing poses while tuning into the cool beat. Tuning into the cool beat. Experience, I was like turning, that's really odd. Experience the return of Ooh La La for yourselves.
Ooh, fun. All right, up next, Spartan Fist. PS4 digital out February 28th. Fight your way to fame, fortune, and glory in this first-person puncher roguelite as you work to retrieve the fabled Spartan Fist. Navigate through an arena that's different each time you play, and delve into a whimsically gritty and colorfully punk pixelated world while fighting your way to the top. So it's like the Roman, like the Spartan kind of a thing, but like
Minecraft.
80s? 80s colors?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, this is a perfect week compared to everything else that's coming out. This is a perfect week for all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Because not to be outdone, Stab, 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 PS4 digital. Stab, Stab, Stab is a physics-based couch multiplayer arena stabbing game for up to 4 players. It gets better. Play as explosive flesh birds with razor-sharp beaks. Stab your friends until they pop in versus mode, or team up to defend yourselves against an unending horde of Cronin birds.
Wow. That sounds awesome. I can see this being a game that like PlayStation Access plays like live stream.
Oh, I hope. I'm emailing them and telling them.
Legit. All right, up next, Tempest, PS4 digital. Tempest is a pirate open world action RPG. Is offering... I'm sorry.
Someone didn't proofread this.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to read it as is. Tempest is a pirate open world action RPG, is offering an ultimate ability to free roam 3 vast worlds filled with dozens of colonies and forts, hundreds of quests, and countless ships to plunder. Trade, fight, explore, and on your own to call friends to do the same together. Set your foot on the land to plunder it.
Ooh,
yikes.
That was brutal. 2 Point Hospital, PS4 digital retail. I heard good things about this one. The hit hospital building management sim comes to console for the first time. Design stunning hospitals, decorate them as you like, cure very unusual illnesses, and manage troublesome staff as you spread your budding healthcare organization across 2 Point County.
Cool. All right, last but certainly not least, Vasilis, PS4 digital, PS Vita, out February 26th. Vasilis is a hand-drawn adventure game. Vasilis, the main character, has lost her husband Peter in a rebellious city center. The city has plunged into chaos by constant riots, and almost every day something is burned or someone is killed. The game is inspired by Ukrainian political events from 2014. Ooh,
that's cool.
Heavy stuff. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm digging that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is the last week in February, and I know that you and I talked about dropping a deuce.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'd like to do that next week.
For sure.
In January, I guess, kind of was like Darwin project for us. Yeah. But I also am going to count my OO Ascension because I looked back and they came out January 31st. Okay. And so I think for this week, it's got to be, because if I'm going to pick one that I hadn't planned on purchasing, I feel like I need to look up how much Coffee Crisis is. And so I'm not voting on that one for sure, but I'm leaning heavily towards that.
I mean, we got to figure out this hay fever.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We need to check out the allergic mailman.
Or Grizzland.
All right. Well, we've got some contenders. We will check back with you all next week and let you know what we decide on.
Yeah.
And we'll play them this week and talk about them for next week.
Yeah.
Even if it's just giving us a day or two, we won't have to complete them. We don't have to play them heavily, but we're definitely going to at least check them out.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Matt, that does it. I want to thank our guests today for coming by. Really appreciated having EmeraldNova.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt, for hanging out with me as well.
It's always a pleasure, Rob, especially when we do see you soon.
Oh, my. Yeah, if you don't normally listen to that, I hope you listen to it today because it was worth it.
100%.
Totally. And thanks for listening to us. Thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate it. Again, you can go over to our Patreon to hang out with us. You can find us on social media. Just look for me over at WeAre1UR2 on Twitter. And until next time, game on.
Game on. This is the homebrew outro music. Delicious. Oh wait, no, that's when you homebrew like beer and stuff. I guess like his would be more like.
Yes, there you go. Now you've got it. Success.